What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and Sam, I am very excited. This is probably going to be one of our best episodes in terms of revisiting the 2016 cap spike that happened. Pretty much everyone was just massively insane for a summer, and I'm very excited to revisit some of these contracts that were handed out.
yeah. I when you told me this idea, I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, typical off-season shit, but we're gonna get into it. You and I had some homework. We listened to our beautiful boy Bill Cook on him and House. We did a 2-part episode. The podcast before free agency opened, and then the one after, and it's something else, folks. I can't wait to share this one with everyone.
There were a lot of gems. They didn't even talk about the insanity of some of the contracts, but we'll get into all of that. They mostly talked about what we're going to lead off with. But before we get into that, let's talk about our sponsor from Underdog Fantasy, the newest and best place to play fantasy sports and win big prizes. And if you can see here on the screen now, if you're listening on audio, you can't hear, but if you can look on the screen, you can see that the NFL season picks are up for Pick'em right now. You can do higher or lower on your favorite players' stats. Like Derek Carr, someone that we're, big fan here on the You Know Ball podcast. Huge fans of Derek Carr. Just don't Google his brother's middle name.
Jesus Christ. I'm assuming, is that like a Steve Kerr's son thing? Is that what we're?
Oh yeah. No.
Okay.
No. It's actually way worse.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I kind of need you to Google it right now, just so you can see, because this is something that Parm brought up. This is something that Parm brought up on a stream once, and he said he felt like he was fucking smoking weed when he saw the name of David Carr's middle name, which I won't say on the stream.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah. Yes. So Google that if you have not already. And before you do that, go on Derek Carr's stats on Underdog Fantasy. He plays for the Saints now. You can go higher or lower on his passing touchdowns, 23.5. For this upcoming NFL season. Obviously, there's also Best Ball Mania you could do for the NFL and NBA and pick your team for this upcoming season. It's a lot of fun. I've already built some teams. I showed it off on an episode last week. And if you have not already, use the promo code SLOP to get a $100 deposit match. Supports the program, all of that good stuff. And we're always doing fun stuff with the people at Underdog for NFL and NBA season. So check it out if you have not already. So, now that we've introduced with that,
that's just going to be like floating around my neck. I can see why you'd want to go from Oakland to New Orleans. It's more of a home and home type situation there. Not New Orleans specifically. Let's just say Louisiana.
Louisiana in general.
There's a lot of
a
lot of places in Louisiana that'll fit right in. Yeah, but Our beautiful Bill. This was like the perfect time to do this podcast, because this was both so soon ago that I feel like it was like 2 seasons ago.
Mm-hmm.
But also some of the names they were saying, I was like, what the fuck? They were talking about like how Kent Bazemore was going to command like $20 million, and I was like, That is a name I have not heard in many moons. So this is 7 years ago, almost to the day.
7 years ago, the cap spike happened. And just so you know, for some background on this, if you did not follow the NBA, I honestly didn't even really follow the NBA religiously in 2016. I was more of a casual. I really amped it up probably about a year or two after this and got full sicko mode. So I was familiar with some of the names that were signing. Obviously, I followed the big signings, which, Kevin Durant, which we're going to lead off with here. But the reason why the cap spike happened was they had just struck a new TV deal that brought a lot more money to the league. And we had never seen a spike like this in the slop era. The last spike that had really kind of took the salary cap up a level was back in 2005. Now, this was obviously pre-Twitter. This was really like the decision, which was as I always refer to as like the birth of slop in 2010, with LeBron announcing that he's going to Miami. And this TV deal kicked in, and in one offseason, the cap jumped from 70 million. So think about how much money players make now.
It's like literally half of what the cap is this year. Like the cap this year is 136, 133, something like that. So it's essentially a half of that was what it was in the year before 2016, 2015. So,
and think about some of these massive contracts that have been signed: Bradley Beal, Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, those Supermax deals. In a few years, Karl Anthony Towns is going to be making $60 million in a single season. And this salary cap the year before this was $70 million for your entire team. So there was $70 million, and it jumped all the way up from $70 million and increased $24 million to $94.1 million, a 32% bump in one offseason. Now, they have kind of changed this in the new CBA so that this can't happen again, unfortunately, even though I think that this would be really hilarious to follow from our perspective. But the new cap has essentially been flattened. So even if they come with a new TV deal in a few years, that isn't going to happen again. They flattened it so that it can only increase by 10% at the most on any given year. You're probably going to see a lot of 10% increases year over year, more so than one big spike, because that can't happen anymore. So the first real thing I want to talk about here is KD to the Warriors. The reason why I want to bring this up is because everything in this offseason revolved around KD and what his decision was going to be. He was one of the three best players in the NBA. Most of the free agents, as we'll get into, were not nearly as good and were spending the money on like a guy like Kevin Durant. The Warriors were obviously the team that was most interested in the team that he ended up with. But I don't know if you remember, but I remember when KD signed with the Warriors and just being like, remember how people reacted when they got Boogie? And we talked about that in 2019. Like it really felt like, it just felt like kind of similar to that. And especially as someone who wasn't as much of a sicko back in 2016 as I became, I was like, this fucking sucks. Like, the best team in the NBA just got one of the three best players, and now they have two of the three best players. And it felt like it kind of was like ruining the league in a way from a casual fan's perspective.
Yeah. So that's exactly, because I was a sicko at this point. Like I really started paying attention to the NBA in like 2008, 2009, like coinciding with like the Celtics getting KG. And then like I stuck with it for the whole rebuild. So this was a very important offseason, specifically for the Celtics as well, because this is when the plan apparently was to try and get Al Horford and Kevin Durant. Like Boston was one of like the 3 or 4 teams that Durant met with that offseason.
The Hamptons 5, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
exactly.
it was the Warriors, the Heat, the Celtics, the Thunder, and I can't remember who the 5th team was, to be honest. But there was,
I think it was it the Knicks? I don't think it was the Knicks.
I don't think it was the Knicks, but there was definitely a major market team that was not the. By the way, funny thing about the league that Bill loves to always bring up, the Lakers, the Lakers whole thing, because this is Kobe Bryant had retired.
Yeah.
The Lakers, who we'll get into it a little bit, had a ton of cap space and wanted to pursue Kevin Durant. And Ramona Shelburne famously said, you know, KD owes it to the Lakers to give them a meeting out of respect for what the Lakers represent as a franchise, you know?
That's awesome.
And he was like, no, you suck. I'm not coming to play for the Lakers. And he didn't even entertain them. Wait, did I say the Heat as one of the?
Yeah, you said the Heat. I think it was the Spurs. Was it the Spurs?
Spurs. There you go.
The other one, yeah.
Spurs was the other one. And keep in mind, Tim Duncan was on the verge of retiring, but they had Kawhi Leonard. Manu came back, and they had LaMarcus Aldridge at the time as well.
Yeah. That was like something. So that was like something that was like very interesting. It was like interesting to get like a reset of like where I want to say everyone's head at, according to Bill and Joe House, where everyone's heads were at. Because one of the things that struck me listening to this podcast, because again, they did, one half before the everything happened and one half after. And what I thought was very interesting was how they were saying Bill's and House's insistence that like the Spurs and the Thunder would have been about as good of a chance at him winning the title as the Warriors.
Sure.
And it's like, I think that just kind of shows where everyone's headspace was at, because like, I think everyone thought this wasn't really going to happen, or like at least fans did. Like maybe that was just, I was in like a Celtics fan bubble, but I never really considered the Warriors. Like I do remember thinking he's probably just going to go back to Oklahoma City, because he was 1 year away from the 10-year, 35% new player maximum. So like financially, to get the most money, it made sense to go back and do that. So that was kind of what I thought the other big option on the table was. And then he just did it. And everyone was like, oh, holy fuck, he actually just did that. That's yep. And then everyone like realized, oh, fuck, a 73-win team just added the fucking MVP from a year and a half ago. Like, yeah, like or last year. I can't remember which year was.
It was 2015, and so a year prior, he had won. It might have been 2014, but I'm pretty sure it was one of those 2 years. He did get hurt one of the years.
Yeah, but it just like that was like insane. It was just like very funny to hear Bill being like, they traded Ibaka for Oladipo and Sabonis.
Credit to Bill. Bill was like, throughout this whole podcast, and as I went back and listened, Bill talked about. He kind of talked about the great what if of those Thunder teams, obviously, which was, they trade Harden. A few years later, they end up losing Kevin Durant for nothing. But one of the things that he talked about on the podcast was like, I really liked their draft night trade that they made when they traded Ibaka for Oladipo, who I still believe in. And he was right about Oladipo. Like prior to the injuries, Oladipo had back-to-back All-Star seasons, one season where he was a second-team All-NBA guy, and was really becoming one of the best scoring two-way wings in the NBA. And this was just prior to that leap that he had made. So Bill was right in that regard. And he talked about how he thought Sabonis could have played from day one. And the other wrinkle about him coming back to OKC was the fact that they were pursuing Al Horford themselves. They also were interested in Al Horford, and
they got their man. Just a few years
eventually, he had it all it took was him signing with the fucking Sixers and having to be salary dumped. But think about it like this. I wrote this down and I said, think about the lineup that you could have constructed if they were able to sign Al Horford. I'm not sure what kind of implications it had to be from clearing salary cap space to sign him, because they did have Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant who would take up a big chunk. And Oladipo was, if I remember correctly, Oladipo was
still on his rookie. He was
still on his rookie deal.
He was like young, like at that.
So
point.
Was it Adams? So in theory, you probably could have kept all of those guys and had access to signing Al Horford. So think about it like this.
You know what they did with the Durant space instead?
I honestly don't even remember.
They fucking extended and re-signed fucking Enes Freedom.
That was
they got in the trade. They got in the trade.
Yeah, they maxed them, right? Yeah.
Essentially, I mean, like it was like 16 million. I don't know if that was the 25% max at the time. Does that math work out? I don't know.
It was close.
Yeah. Like, so that next year, it's very funny. I was thinking about that in the car ride home, and I looked it up before we hopped on here. Yeah. So
I knew they had to use their space somewhere. I couldn't find them signing any free agents. So
wait, they had already done that. Never mind.
Okay, so they would have
16. They fucking paid Enes Kanter. That's fucked up. Man.
I was gonna say I didn't see that on the list, but the reason I say that is they could have dumped Kanter because Kanter still had value. Like they traded Kanter a year later for Carmelo Anthony, and like Carmelo Anthony was seen as having value.
Right. That's who they fucking traded. That's crazy, dude.
Yeah. So
I like totally forgot about Carmelo in OKC.
Yeah.
Oh, that just opened my third eye.
Dopamine rush. Oh my God, that's what I remember that. And the reason I say this is they probably could have dumped Kanter to a team because everyone had salary cap space. So you easily could have dumped Enes Kanter to open up space to bring in Al Horford or worked out a sign and trade with the Hawks or something along those lines, because the Hawks obviously would have had cap space because they used it on Dwight Howard this offseason.
They sure did.
Something that we will talk about as well. But the reason I say this is that you, in theory, if they could have made that all work, you could have had a lineup of Russell Westbrook, who was, by the way, won MVP the next season, Victor Oladipo, Kevin Durant, Horford, and Adams, with Sabonis coming off the bench. And another wrinkle in this is that they still would have had the ammo to trade for Paul George. So, like, think about it like that. Like, they probably could have pulled off a Russ, PG, KD, Steven Adams, Al Horford starting lineup. And that's there's the what if of the Harden era, because at this point you're past the Harden trade. You're a few years past. You're now at where you lose KD for nothing. But like, if they had just gotten KD back, they would have been contenders and possibly won the title the next year. But also, there's this wrinkle of they could have made their team even better and possibly won multiple titles. And then the other wrinkle on top of this is that the thing that we talked about, the Serge Ibaka trade, is what kicked all this off. And that's what led to the eventual rebuild that they're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, like, when we're like listing this all out, I know my favorite thing I do that I know Will loves is when I say, actually, Danny Ainge deserves even more credit than he already did in Media Mafia. Which is a real opinion I actually have. But when you're reading through that list, it's kind of shores up that Presti's probably been the best GM in the league for like almost we're getting close to 20 years now. I mean, he hasn't had that job for 20 years, but it's 17?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, he built the original OKC team with the 3 guys that won MVP. He drafted all those guys.
That's like, it's like a pretty unreal run when you look at like what he's like. He really has not made like that many mistakes, to be honest. Like,
and if he does make mistakes, they're fixable mistakes. They're not like they're not like the mistakes we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, like it's like, it's something like re-signing Cantor to a dog shit number, but then you just get off that and like trade for Carmelo Anthony, and it's fine. Like, and
then a year later, Carmelo Anthony's gone. Like,
right. Just no harm, no foul. Or, the only one that hurts is like that, again, the Harden trade, but that's been litigated to death. We all know the circumstances there. So
yeah. And
not
Bill
a Patreon episode, so I can't do the joke I wanted to make.
I knew exactly what you were going to say. So in a way, this KD going to the Warriors tore down one contender, made the contender even stronger in that regard. And then also on top of that, Bill mentioned it in this podcast, there was a trade during this offseason that Masai, to his credit, turned down. I hate to give Masai credit and Toronto credit for anything, but he talked about it. He says, was confirmed that they turned down Patrick Patterson, Norm Powell, Corey Joseph, and the 9th pick for Serge Ibaka. So Toronto turns that deal down, and they take Jakob Poeltl with that pick. Okay, so you take Jakob Poeltl. Yeah. Obviously, Presti really wanted Sabonis in that draft. Because Sabonis goes 2 picks later. He ends up getting that pick from Orlando in the eventual Ibaka trade. And the reason I bring this up is because they were able to sit on it and say, okay, we're going to let Serge Ibaka go to Orlando. And then within a year, they traded just Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka. So they just trade Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka. And by the way, they extend DeMar DeRozan in this offseason. At the time, seems like an insane contract. Even though DeMar was a very good young player, he got the most amount of money possible that you could get. He got 5 years, $139 million, which is kind of equivalent to like when Bradley Beal signed his contract last offseason. Yeah. And everyone was like, that's so much fucking money for Bradley Beal. That's kind of how people felt about DeMar at the time. And he was 27. So he was still like young, but not young enough that like he had levels to go up in theory. And so they re-sign him, and then they wait on Ibaka. They get Ibaka for basically nothing, just Terrence Ross. And then they end up flipping Jakob Poeltl, DeMar, and a pick for Kawhi before the 2018-2019 offseason. during the 2018 offseason, I should say. And they end up turning that into a title team. So, like, in retrospect, you have to give in one way, it tore down one contender in OKC, built up a stronger one in the Warriors, and then allowed the Raptors to build their title team 2 years later, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's such like a like revolving doors type thing.
Yeah.
And it is like, again, I don't really want to give Masai credit for the way he's murdered slop season in cold blood a couple of different years now. But he did, like, it is funny. It's like, okay, well, I'm just not going to trade with the smart front office. I'll wait till you trade him to a dumb front office. I'll just go get him there. It's fine.
Exactly. And Bill on the second half of this thing, Bill trashed the Magic for being like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you just traded for Serge Ibaka. You gave
traded Oladipo, who's the number 2 pick in the draft.
3 years before.
Everyone knew. I mean, I know it's like one of the worst drafts of all time, but he was like consensus the best player in that draft.
Yeah.
And
it was him or Nerlens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just like to just give up on a guy like that early was crazy. Like,
he was 23, 24. Like, I think he was 23.
No, I think he was younger than that. I think he was 22 when he got traded, because he was like 20 coming out, but I think it was only 2 years.
He played 2 years in college. Yeah. And this was 3 years later. So he
was 3 years. Okay.
Yeah. So he would have been 23, but still, wings, as we've talked about on this podcast before, wings usually pop in their mid-20s. Like, guys like Jaylen Brown, Zach LaVine, Victor Oladipo, these guys, like, the wings are the ones that really pop when they're like 24 to 27. Mm-hmm. And those are the guys that you need to have patience with. And clearly the Magic had no fucking idea what they were doing. This eventually led to them making, a middling team or whatever. And they ended up blowing it up, and they've rebuilt themselves really nicely, but it took years to kind of fix what they did with that trade in this offseason. And I want to bring up this point, which is basically, they talk about Russell Westbrook's value at this time, which was 2016. You probably didn't get to this point of the second podcast.
I didn't. Yeah, I missed.
All right. Do you want to hear the trade package Bill comes up with from the Celtics for Westbrook?
I feel like I must have heard this years ago, and it's, what's funny? Go ahead to lay it on me.
Well, keep in mind, this was before everyone turned on Russell Westbrook. Yeah. This was the year
MVP.
Before.
Year before the
MVP. It was just before he won MVP, because remember, people say that the reason he won MVP was because of the narrative and because
and which is true.
Sure.
That's absolutely what happened, but yeah.
But the reason I say this is that Russ still was in the good fortunes of the media at the time.
Yes.
Like, no one saw it as like, oh, he drove KD out of town and blah blah blah, whatever.
Right. He got left by KD at the altar. Sad.
Exactly. Yeah. It's different.
Tragic.
But the reason I say this is because this was Bill's offer for Russell Westbrook. Okay. Isaiah Thomas, who, had half a really good season with you guys, but hadn't had his MVP-ish season at the time.
Yeah. He had 1.5 good years. I mean, the Celtics, the context here is the Celtics had lost the Hawks in round 1 in a 4-5 matchup. Mm-hmm. Where the Celtics were like the 4-8,
So yeah, I mean, trading Isaiah Thomas near the peak of his value, sure.
Right.
And
he had a good year the next year. We love that year, don't we?
I was going to say that was his best year. Yeah, the next year.
No, next year. Yeah, next year. It hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, it had not happened yet.
Yeah.
But he also included the Nets 2017 first and the Nets 2018 first, which became Jason Tatum in the 2017.
Yeah.
So and you know what House's response to that was?
What?
House said, "Suck my dick."
Let's go.
Let's go. Classic House.
I mean, so the thing was that I don't think people thought the Nets were going to be bad again. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, they had finished it, because the next year they literally, I don't know if they finished with the worst record, but the Celtics won the lottery the next year with the Nets pick.
Yes.
They were like god awful. And that was like a Nets team that had, I think Jeremy Lin tears his ACL like two games. Was that the year that?
Yeah, the Nets were players in this offseason as well. They had cap space, and they threw the restricted free agency offer sheet at Jeremy Lin. They also threw it at Alan Crabb.
Yeah. Well, no. Alan Crabb signed with Portland, and then they took him back.
No. He was given an offer sheet by the Nets, and the Blazers matched it. Then they traded him to the Nets later.
That's right. That's how that went. God, that was so funny. Was that when they signed? I can't remember. I'm like losing. I should know better because I was going to a lot of Nets. My friend was a season ticket holder at this point, and I went to a lot of like Nets games around this time. But they I think they hadn't traded Brook Lopez to the Lakers yet. I don't think, right?
Nope.
So, because that was D'Angelo Russell that came back, and
D'Angelo Russell was in the Lakers' offer for Russell Westbrook at the time. Here, it was this was Bill's offer from this. This is in retrospect a crazy offer. It was D'Lo, Julius Randle, and Brandon Ingram for Russell Westbrook.
Yeah. All the Lakers stuff was so fascinating because Bill was going through, because this is no Cubby, he's going through the young Lakers, and it's like. It's their young core we all know about. You know, there was like Julius Randle. They brought in Dang and Mozgov this offseason, famously. That's what they did with their cap space. But then they were bringing in D'Angelo Russell, and then he lists off Jordan Clarkson. Then he lists off Ryan Kelly, which I was like, it was killing me because I remember Ryan Kelly kind of being like, everyone's like, Ryan Kelly, like, you know, I remember that.
There are these guys that like have like, as they say, a cup of coffee with teams, and they get brought up as if they're like Ian Clark was brought up on this podcast for the Warriors. James McAdoo was brought like names that we haven't thought of there are even some players that I forgot existed that signed contracts. There was one guy I literally just didn't even remember who he was. But we will get to him eventually. But I just want to bring up.
I was just gonna say, Bill brought up Lance Thomas on the Knicks. I transferred back in time to like, because this was like the year after I stopped drinking and I was still like having a hard time with it. So I like, literally like remember like standing outside like a liquor store and like dragging my feet as I like walk away.
He heard Lance Thomas and he got shivers.
Yeah, I was gonna say it almost cost me 7 years of sobriety hearing Lance Thomas's name on this podcast. I was like,
you were in New York at the time. We were both in New York at the time of this.
Yeah. I had gone to man, there was a lot going on. I remember that because it was 4th of July was when Horford and Durant signed. And I remember I was coming back from, this was like my first year not doing drinking, and I remember everyone had those Bud Heavy American flag cans. And I was like, I just want one of them. I just want fucking one of them.
Then you guys signed Horford, and that was enough of a rush.
That got me through because I thought we were getting Durant. There were like, Bill talks about this, saying like this with his dad. That's like all the Celtics fans. That was all we were talking about. Was like, I know friend of the pod, all Sixers love him. Danger Cart had like laid out on the Reddit that he thought like 2 years ago, like 2 years before this, that he thought Danny Ainge's plan was to get Kevin Durant and Al Horford, and we were like, "That's gonna happen!" And
that would have been amazing.
Came up a little short.
Well, horrible for us, but I'm saying that would have been amazing if he had called his shot from that far. Did it. Yeah, but
I know Danger Cart makes people mad, but he usually knows what he's talking about. Like, so, anyway.
So I just want to wrap up the KD thing because KD goes to the Warriors, obviously as more of a not as much of a sicko. I still probably would have felt the same way about KD going to the Warriors. I would have been like, great, this ruins the league for the next 2 to 3 years. Like, why are we doing this? He does sign a 1-and-1 deal with the Warriors, which was the popular thing to sign at the time before everyone just got their money. LeBron famously would sign a 1-and-1 a lot. It essentially applies pressure to front offices so that they don't get like passive with their moves, and you can be like, look, I'll leave after the season if you don't, you're not aggressive and makes them. But the reason I say this is because Bill has this real soft spot for Kevin Durant. A lot of people seemingly had a huge soft spot for Kevin Durant until this offseason, I feel like, because the way that he talked about Durant and if you compare it to the way that people talked about LeBron James at the time, and they talk about this in the second half of the episode, and the reason why they say they didn't really respect LeBron because he made a whole spectacle of it, right? He had a TV show, and he did the whole introduced in Miami for the decision a few years before, not 1 championships, 2 championships, 3 championships, 4 championships, that whole thing. But I feel like they gave, and a lot of people until really like a little bit further along kind of gave KD more of a pass for this, because as Bill argued on here, it's really funny hearing Bill argue on behalf of players.
Yes.
As opposed to, kind of arguing the way that he argues now. He said OKC was not loyal to Seattle. OKC was not loyal to Harden. They traded him. They fired Scott Brooks, and that sports and sports teams are unloyal, and that KD had every right to leave in free agency.
This was Bill's college communist era.
Yeah, seriously.
ESPN had just fired him the year before. He was like, "Fuck the man."
I know my worth.
I know my worth. Like unions rock. Actually, this was like and then all teenagers have to grow up sometime and get a mortgage, and that's what happened with Bill once that. Spotify. He was at this point though. He was just a young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 49-year-old. Like
before that Spotify money corrupted him.
Yeah, kind of turned him against his fellow who. I don't. Glorious leader Kim, I would say, but so can I say something before we get too far in this? Just because I want to.
Yes.
I thought the other thing listening to this that was like really staggering was Bill's appraisal of the Warriors, because this was like a very interesting time for the Warriors where they had won one title that nobody had really seen coming.
Sure.
And then they had won 73 games and lost the title.
Yes.
In like pretty excruciating fashion. So this Bill was making this argument I don't remember hearing a lot, because this was before everyone was like, the Warriors are like the greatest thing on earth. This was before the Warriors fans got the last Thanos gem to become the most powerfully annoying force on the planet. Like they were, this was like, you could still kind of do this on the Warriors. And so the first thing was Bill said the Warriors had 3 of the top 12 players. In the NBA.
I did want to talk about that.
Almost crashed.
No, hold on. Clear it up. The Warriors had 3 of the top 12 players in the NBA before they signed Kevin Durant.
Yes. And so he's talking about the 2015-2016 Warriors having 3 of the top 12 players in the NBA.
He said no. He went even further with it, by the way.
Okay, and
House was like, okay, top 15, sure.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if I'm willing. And then Bill goes, I would say top 10.
That's that. Okay. Well, and then the other thing that was so funny about it was he was like, Draymond, but Clay is in there. Like the insistence that Clay was in there was so funny to me. And I was trying to think, like, was this insane at the time, or just me with the benefit of like retrospect, like looking back on it. And I don't think there's like any way that's possible. I mean, this was kind of a weak zone for the league. Yeah, you had like your Carmelos and your Dwight Howards and those guys were kind of like on the decline. Like
Paul George had the leg injury. You also had the fact that Anthony Davis wasn't like, he was thought to be like the next great, but like Anthony Davis and Damian Lillard really hadn't popped off at this point. It was really like the top 4 guys were pretty clear. It was Steph, LeBron, KD, and Harden. I feel like we're the top 4.
Kawhi was sort of in this middle zone.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Because Kawhi was making the offensive leap, but hadn't gotten to like God level Kawhi quite yet at that point. He was still like improving every single year and was like the best defensive wing in the NBA. So let's just say those 5. And then if you want to throw in like Russ or whoever, because like Russ was still thought of to be really amazing at the time and was a really, really good player at his peak. And this was around that time. But the reason I say this is because like, I do think part of it is like I think everyone was just high on the Warriors supply, and we didn't have a chance to step back and be like, okay, maybe Klay Thompson is as amazing as he is because of the fact that he plays within the Warriors with Steph and Draymond.
Yep. So that's exactly what I was gonna say. I was shocked by how high that was, and I was shocked how fucking rough Bill was on Steph.
Yeah.
Like that finals, and like he was talking about Steph like he was like Kyrie Irving, which was
that was common sentiment though. That was a thing. I remember people were like, wow. And the example he used was the Kevin Love play at the end of the 2016 finals when he was switched onto the perimeter and he didn't blow by him or get to the rim.
I will admit, in Bill's defense, I remember watching that game live and thinking in the moment, what the fuck just happened? Like that was a in-game moment kind of akin to like Ben Simmons passing the ball. Mm-hmm. Or
and Steph had just had that turnover like a minute before in the game, minute and a half, and he threw the ball out of bounds when he's trying to do a behind the back pass. Like the in the moment, people were like, okay, but also at the same time, like Bill's always been the number one Steph guy in the media, and like they had just won 73 games and won the title the year before. He was the best player in the league, but the only player other than LeBron from that era you could say was the best player.
You could feel like Bill's like energies working against him because like he hadn't. This was kind of a coin flip, right? Where you could feel Bill kind of like hedging his bets. Quite literally, by the way, because Bill just says like the Warriors losing.
He was pissed at him. He was like, Steph Curry owes me $8,000.
Bill owns. What a fucking pimp.
So funny.
It's such a funny thing. That's why Bill's popular. Because that's just like a sports like some dipshit guy I would meet at a party. That's like exactly what fuck that guy. I lost $8,000 because of him.
Relatable.
Yeah, just like being mean to Steph because of that. But I can't. I don't know. I that was like very jarring to hear, and maybe it's just because I've had like 7 years of like just some of the most pure like Steph propaganda that is like just everywhere and just nauseating and and like who fucking cares? I just whatever. Like it was very jarring to hear someone like openly questioning like is Steph good in the playoffs?
There was Steph didn't really shake it the whole thing until he won Finals MVP against you guys, which is insane to me because I remember being at the time being like, Steph, I even before he won Finals MVP last year, I was like, Steph's one of the 10 best players ever. I think it's insane that people act the way that they do about his playoff resume when like he had, even at this point, had amazing playoff performances where he would just like casually drop 40 points and no one would talk about it in the same light because the way that he impacted the game just looks so different than guys like LeBron James.
I think that more has to do with like how uniquely annoying like Warriors fans are too. Like I wonder if people would act that way about Steph if he was like on like the Wolves or something. You know what I'm saying? Like
no, I do think that people
he's on the Lakers or Celtic. Like the Warriors are one of those like 5 awful fan bases like us, the Lakers, the Heat.
Yeah, but think about the 15 greatest players in NBA history. Yeah. All of them are 6'5" and above, except for Steph Curry. Like people refuse to believe that anyone below 6'5" could be one of the greatest players ever. And like Steph had the resume, he had everything. He was the first unanimous MVP. Like, like he was untouchable, dude. Like and at this time, like to question a guy who just come up 73 wins because of some insane recency bias, it was just out of pocket to me. But the thing I will say is the fact that Durant goes there kind of like, first off, they talked about like the mechanics to get Durant to Golden State. Like they had to let Harrison Barnes walk. We'll talk about his contract. They had to dump Andrew Bogut, and they had leaked months prior to this during their 73-9 season that they were 43-4 at the time. And they had leaked to Woj that they wanted to get Kevin Durant that offseason. Yeah. And people were begrudgingly like, because everyone kind of hated the Warriors to back up your point, everyone kind of hated the Warriors at the time because their ownership and front office was so pompous too about the light year shit. And then Bill was like, I would have come out if I were Joe Lacob and been like, oh, this is not happening, like whatever. And he thinks that it fucked with Harrison Barnes' confidence because Harrison Barnes knew that he was going to be gone after the season and that they were going to replace him with Kevin Durant essentially.
Yeah, but Bill always makes that point, like, erroneously. Like, he always says, like, he says that hurt Jaylen Brown's thing. And look, Jaylen Brown and the Celtics have signed that max extension, and everything's going well.
Everything's great. No worries.
Great.
No worries.
Fun.
People listen back to these episodes in like 2 months after Jaylen signs his extension and just listen to you like slowly lose your mind and laugh at it.
I mean, he probably will re-sign, but I just I hate the what I really hate is just like and it's not their fault. I just hate the local media being like, yeah, what are you talking about? Baby is fine. Like, she's not. I text her every once in a while, but no, Jaylen's not mad. He's not. He's fine. This is great. We have a great relationship.
At this point, I just want
trade demand next year.
I was gonna say, I just want everything to be done so you'll stop talking about it.
Yeah, I know.
Because you're slowly slipping. You're about to go on vacation, and you're thinking about Jaylen Brown's contract still.
Yeah, I will say that this week was like the first week I like really missed like basket. Like, I'm ready for basketball to start again. So even though my team is going to be like one of the least fun teams to watch in NBA history, there's going to be like 2 passes and then guys shooting over closeout defenders, and they'll win games, but they're just ugly basketball. It will. I still want that to happen.
Yes, I agree. This is the first week. I'm trying to fill it with movies and music and video games, and it doesn't hit quite the same.
Yeah. Watching Josh Peck in period pieces.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get into the insane contracts because we're 40 minutes in and we haven't even discussed. We talked about Kevin Durant. We talked about the Warriors. We talked about everything regarding that. Let's talk. I'm just going to run down a list of insane contracts. And I have some sections set up here for specific teams that we'll get to.
Okay. Are we trying to draft the contracts? Or is that what
do we want to, or how about I just run down them and you tell me which one stands out to you? All right, ready?
Okay.
These are the ones that headline, but there are some that are coming later as well.
Yeah, I have some in my mind. Yeah.
The Hornets, Nicholas Batum, 5 years, $120 million.
Forgot that one. Can I list off some and then you tell me? Okay, so
yes,
I'm gonna try and get all the ones that I remember being egregious. Joakim Noah to the Knicks.
Yes, I have that on here.
I believe that was 4 years, 80 million. 4 years, 90 million. Yeah. So,
it was 472.
Timothy Mozgov, fresh off his NBA champion, Timothy Mozgov.
Yes. 4 years, 64, but it was reported at 470 originally, I believe.
Luol Deng, all-star Luol Deng.
Luol Deng, 472.
Yep. Evan Turner with the Blazers.
That is a real spicy one, and I want to talk about the Blazers in a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's one of the spicier ones that's on this list. Yeah. And
that was 4 years. Again, another $80 million contract. Yeah.
70. Yeah.
70. Yeah. That's fucking tough, man.
And keep in mind, 4 years, 70. So that's, a little bit less than $20 million per year.
No.
But the salary cap even still was only $90 million. So it was like almost a quarter of the salary cap for Evan Turner. And I have some other ones here I want to just run through real quick. Chandler Parsons, 4 for 94 from the Grizzlies.
That's the other one.
The Rockets signed Ryan Anderson, 4 for 80. The Magic signed Bismack Biyombo after trading for Serge Ibaka, and they had Nikola Vucevic still. 4 for 72. The Magic signed Bismack Biyombo.
That one I completely memory hold.
Oh, there are plenty that we're gonna get to.
I do not remember that one at all.
Kent Bazemore, 4 for 70 back to the Hawks.
I remember that one. Yeah.
How about this one? I totally forgot about this one. Solomon Hill, 4 years, $48 million, which in retrospect seems insane. He was coming off his 3rd season in the NBA. He barely played really. He was at the time he was on the Pacers. he went to the Pelicans.
And
the Pelicans signed him to 4 years, $48 million. He was coming off his third year, which was by far his best year in the NBA. Cosmic Fortune got him $48 million on the open market when the salary cap was still only $90 million. And I literally don't even know who this guy is. Like, once again, keep in mind, was not a full-on sicko. Miraz Teletovic?
Yeah, Mirza Teletovic. I remember this. Yeah,
on the Nets, $30 million to the Bucks.
Oh, he went to the Bucks. He was on the Nets,
and he was on the Suns the year before that.
But I think he started on the Nets because I remember I watched a lot of Mirza, like, because this is I only know this because I went to so many Nets games during like the Joe Johnson, Darren Williams, living in Brooklyn, and Mirza, he was like a stretch. He was a stretch four. Like type of guy. He was like, he played a lot like Mirotic. And he was not good. He was not good.
The common theme that you'll find throughout all of these contracts, almost none of these players ended their contract on their current team, or they were traded to another team. I'm sorry, they either got dumped at some point or they were like stretched and waived a few years later. The large majority of contracts signed in this offseason. By the way, all of these contracts seem kind of insane at the time. Guys like Nicholas Batum was a good player, but no one
crazy. Everyone was like, "What the fuck?"
But everyone was like, 5 years, $120 million for Nicholas Batum, and then you have guys like Chandler Parsons, who like was a good role player, but like had all these injuries during that contract that makes it look even worse now than it was then. And like, even at the time, people were like, why are all these random role players getting huge bags?
Yeah. Nobody knew how to like project it, because like on the one hand, it was like, because we do this still to this day.
Sure.
There are guys who get paid. Like, I'm guilty of this with Jalen Brunson last year, where I was like, I don't know. And obviously Jalen Brunson, that's like the best case scenario you could have hoped for Jalen Brunson. But still, like, even if Jalen Brunson was just like a starter, that's still like a pretty good deal. You know, like, just the numbers just keep going higher, you know, like, but that said, this is like unreal amounts of money. Like, I think Courtney Lee got a contract with the Knicks this offseason. He was with the Celtics before, and he was getting like $6 million a year. And that was a pretty good contract for Courtney Lee. Like, he was like, okay. I think he made like $12 million a year with the Knicks when they signed
4 years,
him.
$50 million, pretty much exactly $12 million a year.
Yes. Fucked up that's still rattling around the old bean up here, like and I was like, oh yeah, no, there's no way we could possibly give Courtney Lee $12 million a year, you know, because that was insane to me, because I was still used to the $70 million cap, and it's like, I'm not. Courtney Lee's a starter, but I'm not giving him like
but even with this new money. Even with the 20 extra million or the 24 extra million, none of these contracts age well, except for like 3. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. But like some of them are like at the time seemed insane. And none of these players finished their contracts on their teams. And that is at least a sign that these teams knew these deals were bad pretty much instantly.
Yeah. Like, everyone knew, like, I think it was very funny. Bill's like killing the Knicks over like the Noah deal and like some of the and he goes, I love that Brandon Jennings contract though. He's
got a lot more basketball in him. We said 2016 we had still not given up on Brandon Jennings, who wasn't good for like 6 years.
Can I is this a safe space for me to admit something?
Were you a big Brandon Jennings guy?
I was actually a Joakim Noah guy. I thought that contract might end up being okay.
Like, but Joakim Noah was a great player.
I love that season. He got MVP votes for the Bulls when he was like finished like 5th in MVP voting. I was like, this is one of the greatest players of all time. I was a big Joakim Noah guy. Probably part of that was because we had those fist fights with the Bulls, and he just played so well against the Celtics every time. And I was like, this guy right here, he's fucking awesome. And I never let that go. And like,
but let's put it in perspective, because Joakim Noah, obviously a great player. Someone, Bill made fun of him for a guy. They're just signing guys who peaked 2 or 3 years ago. Was his whole thing. Noah had made the All-Star team in 2012, 2014. He got MVP votes. He won a Defensive Player of the Year, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But the thing was, he was 30 at the time that he signed this contract with the Knicks, and he was coming off a season where he played 29 games for the Bulls. And the reason that people thought that this was an insane contract for him was because the age and the injury concerns. Like, Joakim Noah was a great player, and maybe people might have still saw playing a defensive first guy like that a lot of money would be insane. But with the age and injury concerns, it made it pretty obvious it was going to be a bad contract from the jump. And let's just talk about the Knicks real quick.
Didn't they still have Tyson Chandler too at that time? Or am I wrong?
I don't think they did. I don't think they did, because he had signed in 2012. He was no longer on the Knicks. No, he went back to the Mavericks and was on the Suns at that point. But the reason I say this is because let's talk about the Knicks offseason real quick, because the Knicks signed Joakim Noah. This is the Phil Jackson offseason. Phil Jackson's running the team. He gives Joakim Noah 4 years, $72 million. Horrible contract. Joakim Noah's injured all the time. He barely ever plays. They end up having to get rid of him towards the end of the deal. A really just terrible deal. Courtney Lee, 4 years, $50 million. The way that they put it on the podcast was like, think about it like, would you pay Courtney Lee 50% more than what he's worth because of this cap spike, which the math is kind of off there because it was only a 34% cap spike. It wasn't a 50% cap spike. But the reason he was saying this was he got 4 years, $50 million. Once again, Courtney Lee was a fine player. He was just injured all the time. He never could stay healthy with the Knicks. Lance Thomas got 4 years, $28 million. He got bought out in the last year of his deal.
I need a beer. Every time my trigger, that's gonna have me 7 years of sobriety. I'm coming back from the woods next week, just pounding beers, drunk on the fun.
True. Kept saying it. He kept saying Lance Thomas.
Everyone kept texting Sam Lance Thomas until he was activated like the Manchurian Candidate.
I was gonna say it's like in Citizen Kane. Rosebud.
Lance Thomas, and then I play a game of I get a box of Franzia and play Slapbag and play a Blackout. It's gonna be the relapse, baby. Let's go.
I was not ready for a Franzia slapbag reference. Oh my god.
That's right. Us elder millennials, baby. We were doing some pretty fucking embarrassing things. So don't ever let them
still are in public now.
We're still doing it.
So not only did the Knicks sign all these guys, which by the way, the smarter front offices, which there were a lot of dumb ones at this time. We kind of need more dumb front offices again. But the smarter front offices during this time were either giving shorter term deals to guys, or they were essentially signing guys that, they knew were going to be worth the contract, generally speaking. The Knicks did the opposite, where they gave them all 4 years, fully guaranteed. A lot of these contracts were second year wasn't guaranteed, third year wasn't guaranteed, whatever. Team option. The Knicks went all in. 4 years, they gave all this money. And then on top of that, they traded for Derrick Rose the same offseason as well. So they ended up trading Robin Lopez, who, was a fine starting center at the time. They ended up trading, they traded Jose Calderon and Jerian Grant, who, whatever, they're just, they're kind of just filler in the trades to make it work.
Jose Calderon. God damn, dude. Raptors and Pistons legend, I believe.
Yeah, he played for a ton. He played for the Cavs. He played for he was all over the place. But the reason I bring this up is because the Knicks, that famous quote that came from that offseason was Derrick Rose being they say there are two super teams, the Warriors with KD and us, Joakim Noah, Carmelo Anthony, Derrick Rose Bulls. Those were and Kristaps Porzingis, because So the Knicks' real issue this offseason was just giving so many years and so much guaranteed money. None of these guys ended up finishing their contracts on the Knicks.
Which, by the way, would not be that bad if you were any other team besides one of the three teams that actually uses fucking cash.
In theory, yeah, sure.
In theory, yeah. Like, I mean, yeah.
Well, the Knicks front office at least learned from the mistakes, except for one minor exception in the Evan Fournier contract, in that they just don't give big bags to guys who big long-term bags. Like they'll give you a balloon payment to Bobby Portis or whoever, but like they're never going to sign guys for more than like 2 or 3 years, and that's what they learned.
I think that one was them thinking they were twisting the knife on the Celtics. I think because remember that was the offseason where the Celtics had just lost in round 1 to the Nets, and the Knicks were like, we can kill them right now. Like, I think was what they were thinking. We'll steal their backcourt. We'll sign Kemba Walker, who's been waived by the Thunder. And we will have Evan Fournier. And now we have the Celtics backcourt. Now, the problem with that plan was that the Celtics backcourt was absolute dog shit. And it was the reason they lost in round 1 that year. But I mean, I forgot about the Phil Jackson era, to be honest.
Same here. Because people always bring up Isaiah Thomas, but I forgot about Phil Jackson running the team for a few years and made the Porzingis pick, which was a really good pick and a shit draft. But otherwise is not good. So let's talk a little bit about the Lakers, another team on here. By the way, there was a graphic on ESPN when I looked this up. The 6 worst deals ranked by total surplus value. So I'm assuming this is like a Kevin Pelton.
Kevin Pelton had to be Kevin Pelton.
Yeah. Do you want to guess who number 1 was for this? You're never going to guess it, but I want you to guess. This includes
worst contract in terms of like surplus value.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah. This includes extension.
Okay.
This includes guys who were extended, guys who signed in free agency. 6 worst deals ranked by total surplus value this offseason.
Worst deals. Was Al Horford on there?
No. He's always been a good analytics guy.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I just remember everyone was talking about, wow, that Al Horford contract is going to look pretty rough in year 4.
Yeah.
Here we are like 8 years later. Dwight Howard, maybe?
No, it actually wasn't. It was DeMar DeRozan, who, keep in mind, analytics hated DeMar. He shot a bunch of mid-rangers, not a fit
stop. Having the last laugh yet again.
Yes.
Styling on the nerds.
He signed a 5-year, $139 million contract. It was seen as a negative player by RPM. He had a surplus value of negative $78 million, according to this. And second place was Evan Turner. That's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Evan Turner had a negative. So Evan Turner signed a 4-year, $70 million deal, and his surplus value was negative $72 million.
That sounds about right, to be honest. Like, by the way, I loved Evan Turner on the Celtics when he was making like $5 million. That fucking rocked. Like, a lot of fun.
He had one good year in his career, and it was with you guys.
Yeah, no, like both years Evan Turner was here. I was like lower on him. I kind of treated him the way that I treated Brogdon, but the fact that like he didn't cost us Marcus Smart or something like that means that like when he left, I was like, oh, that's fun. Also, he had like some really
you somehow fit that into this podcast. It's unbelievable.
But I will say that that Evan Turner is also low key. If you've never had Evan Turner on your team, a quotes God. He some people, I think they said somebody
sounds
said
like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or Meatwad.
Well, we hated Evan Turner because he was the second pick in the draft, and he was such a disappointment.
Well, and I think that this comes from like him being booed in Philly, and they asked him, and they said, Evan, like, why do you think that the Philly fans are booing you after 3 years here? And he's like, well, Jesus was hated too.
Let's go.
Goat King.
Evan Turner, one of my favorite Sixers kind of what ifs is that 2010 draft where they drafted him and then everyone wanted them to take Boogie Cousins because Kentucky was awesome the year before and John Wall went number 1, but also in that top 10 were Gordon Hayward and Paul George. So if they had drafted him, if they have not drafted Evan Turner, the process probably never happens because of the fact that the team was just would have been good. Like the team would have been like Iggy, Paul George, like they would or Drew Holiday, like Thad Young was still pretty good and young, like Nikola Vucevic, like they would have had a pretty good young team.
I'm going to forget this, but I just want to squeeze this in real quick. I thought it was really funny that Thad Young was traded for the 20th pick in the draft to the Pacers. And it was literally 6 years later that exact same trade happened with Masai trading.
Oh my God, I didn't even realize that.
20's first round pick for Thad Young.
Karis LeVert was drafted this offseason. Karis LeVert was the pick that Thad Young was traded for. And then Karis LeVert ended up on the Pacers at a certain point too, funny enough. But the reason that I bring this up is because one of my favorite Evan Turner stories, I told it on the podcast like very early in the podcast, like probably our first few months we had it, but he had Evan Turner, one of my favorite stories. He talked about how like he thought that Hinkie got a bad rap when it came to like having relationships with players because of how the media was like, oh, he only treats players like their numbers and contracts and he trades them and da-da-da. And he's like, no, Evan Turner was like Sam Hinkie was like a really nice guy. Like when he communicated with me when I was being traded and, you know, when I was traded finally, after months of rumors, he offered to drive me to the airport. And he drove me to the airport. And then I was like, that's like literally a saying, I'll drive this fucking guy to the airport to get him out. And Evan Turner was like, what a nice guy.
The saying you say when you want to get rid of someone so fucking badly. Yeah, that's awesome. Shout out to ET. Great. I really enjoyed Evan Turner. Shout out. I know he had bad NBA experiences with 3 out of the 4 fan bases he played for, but I enjoyed my Evan Turner experience.
So I'm just going to run down really quickly the other guys that were on the negative surplus value thing here. Bradley Beal was third, negative 69 million.
Okay. So that was the other thing that blew my fucking mind was Bill and House were complaining about the Brad Beal contract.
I know. They have been for a decade. Yeah.
And I was like, wait, so that contract they hated ended and it like the worst contract ever signed. Yep. He then got the worst contract ever. Like,
to be fair, Beal had been injured at that point in his career. He hadn't really popped in a way that people had anticipated. He became an all-star like literally right after this, I think. Yeah. And I think that
they had their best team of like the last like 30 years this season. Yeah, coming up.
This upcoming season, and also like Beal was 23 at the time. Does this model just not take projection into account? Like, like if he's 23 and like you would assume that a guy gets better from age 24 to 28 when he's on the contract because he signed a 5-year deal for 128 million. I mean, the amount of money that Bradley Beal's made in his career is just absolutely amazing. But yeah, so he was seen as one of Kent Bazemore, Harrison Barnes, who we're going to talk about at a certain point, and then of course Timothy Mozgov. Timothy Mozgov, by the way, we'll talk about the Lakers right now. Timothy Mozgov was the first announced signing of free agency, by the way. And I went back and I found the Woj tweet. And all of the replies from people that I know, the quote tweets, all that shit were like, what the fuck is happening? 30 minutes into free agency, 12:30, just past midnight, and Timothy Mozgov is announced for 4 years, 70 million. It ended up being 4 years, 65 million. But like the amazing part about the Mozgov contract to me is that how did Matthew Dellavedova not get the bag? Like he got a good bag this offseason. He ended up signing for a 4-year, $38 million contract, but he got like half the amount of money that Mozgov got. And like, I don't know if you remember, but I remember as more of a casual being like, oh, Dellavedova was the one who balled out in the finals. Like,
I mean, the Mozgov deal was just such a like irregularity. Like everyone was like, what the fuck? Like that and the Evan Turner ones were the two that were everyone was like, what the fuck is happening? Like,
I think I realized what happened. Dellavedova balled out in the 2015 finals when Kyrie was hurt. And I think he kind of came back down to earth a little bit the next year, but he still got a bag. But the Mozgov contract was everyone. He was 29. He was about
he
like
wasn't even like that good. I think he had like played for the Cavs for either a half or 1.5 seasons at that point. And like
he
wasn't
played for
even
most
like,
of his career for the Nuggets at that point.
Nuggets, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and a little bit he was also the piece that like held up the Carmelo Anthony trade. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like he was like, it was like, and like that was like Bill's go-to thing to make fun of, was like, really, we're gonna hold the trade up because of Mozgov? Sure. And then it turned out Mozgov was like pretty good for the Nuggets, and it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that does make sense. But
that's that's good GMs, and I hate to give Masai credit, but the good GMs will hold on to guys like Timothy Mozgov. You can't let that guy walk out the door.
Yeah. No, seriously, because didn't they make the Western Conference Finals during that time with like the Ty Lawson, Timofey Mozgov?
I don't know if they made
I think
they won like 40. Finals. They did win 50 games that one year that they had Iggy.
I think it was the 2015?
Would have been 2012.
Okay, I'm gonna investigate this. You continue, because now
the reason I say this is because they only had Iggy for 2012, 2013, right? And that was the year that they really popped off. Or am I misremembering? Yeah,
no,
that
team
was good.
2015, 2016 Nuggets finished
57 and 25.
Yeah, the Brian Shaw. No, you're right. Yeah, that was the last George Karl year.
Yep.
Kenneth Faried, the Manimal.
They had a good team though. Like they had
Kufos before he fell off.
They had Gallo, Iggy, Ty Lawson when he was still good, Andre Miller at the end of his career, Mozgov, like Corey Brewer. Like they had guys. Like they have
Wilson Chandler.
Yeah, Wilson Chandler before he became a corpse. Like they had guys that like were like recognizable even now. But yeah. So the reason I bring this up, they signed Mozgov. So the argument for signing Luol Deng to a 4-year, $72 million contract and Timothy Mozgov was that they wanted to remain competitive without Kobe and have kind of like a much worse version of what the Rockets just did this past offseason, which was like, we want to have veterans that will help us compete with the young guys so that while Brandon Ingram and Julius Randle and all these guys are kind of coming into their own, they're going to have these vets that they can kind of count on night in, night out. Well, what it turned out to do was Luol Deng signed there. Mozgov was just terrible. Never really played for them. And Luol Deng started for the Lakers his first year until they were like, Brandon Ingram is clearly going to be a guy. So let's play Brandon Ingram a ton. So they benched Luol Deng for Brandon Ingram. Luke Walton did. And a year later, they sign KCP in free agency, the Lakers, and KCP gets arrested and had to. Do you remember that? He had to serve during the season. He had to serve.
He had a bracelet. He had a bracelet. Like he couldn't like leave or do any of that other stuff. Yeah.
So he had that, and then Luol Deng ended up starting during that stretch when KCP was out, and then they basically just agreed to never play him again. And they were like, just go home. And they bought him out of his contract like a year after that. Like he barely ever played for the Lakers.
Somebody said they literally finished paying off the contract last year because they like stretched him with like 3 years to go or something like that.
They waived and stretched him in, I believe it was the third year of the contract in 2000, going into 2018, 2019, like in the middle of that season, I believe they waived and stretched him to create max space for that. And then
LeBron?
LeBron was already there. He had gone. It was so that they could it was to get Anthony Davis essentially, like, and then they ended up signing Danny Green and they brought back KCP and they. Why are you looking confused?
18-19 went. I guess that doesn't.
Yeah, they got him. So in 18-19, they waived and stretched Luol Deng.
They like weren't good the first Bron year.
Yeah, they were, and then LeBron got hurt. They were like third place in the West, and LeBron got hurt, and then they were trying to trade for Anthony Davis to go all in on that season, and then the Pelicans wouldn't trade them Anthony Davis. They waited until the next offseason, and they basically had they had the ability to send out contracts like guys that made good money, like Lonzo and Brandon Ingram on their rookie deals. And then on top of that, they had cap space to sign Danny Green. They brought back KCP. They and then they got some value contracts as well a little bit further down the line. But the reason I bring this up is, they were still paying Luol Deng until this past season. Like they were paying him a little bit of money technically on their books, even though I'm sure that lump sum had already been paid out to him years ago. But so that the Lakers offseason was pretty much a disaster, but in classic Lakers fashion, they get bailed out. They pretty much, I think they got off the Mozgov contract pretty relatively. I think he was included in the trade that was for Brook Lopez. I think he was in the D'Lo deal.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right to me. Yeah.
So it was D'Lo. Was it D'Lo, Mozgov? D'Lo and Mozgov for Brook Lopez and Kyle Kuzma, I believe was the trade.
That sounds the pick that became, because I think Kuzma was drafted so it had to be the pick. Yeah. So it was the pick. That sounds right to me. I'm going to look it up here.
So, and they ended up letting Brook Lopez walk in free agency, but they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
He could have played with AD and LeBron if they had just kept him, but they wouldn't have had the cap space to sign like Danny Green.
That's quietly like an all-time bad trade by the Brooklyn Nets, to be honest.
What, D'Lo for Brook Lopez and Kyle Kuzma?
And the 27th pick? Yeah,
I don't know. Look,
it's really bad. Brook Lopez was an all-star, man.
So D'Lo made an all-star team for them.
He's way more of a fake all-star. Look at what Brook has done since then.
Agreed. But also, my whole thing with that trade from the Nets perspective is, who cares? You were doing upside swings on guys. You were taking risks trying to find the next guy.
Why are you including a pick, though? Why are you including a pick?
I mean, D'Lo probably had value around the league at the time. He was coming off his rookie season, right? Wasn't it that off season?
Yeah, but wasn't good. He was an upside. I'm trying to think of who the
if Jabari Smith was traded after this past season.
Exactly. That's a good comp. Yeah.
I think he would have had value, even though I don't know if he would have. They probably would have lost that trade in retrospect. But
would you have traded Nick Claxton and a first round pick for Jabari Smith?
Well, Nick Claxton's 10 years younger than Brook Lopez was when he was traded. This Brook Lopez thing has been an insane outlier in terms of how good he is into his mid-30s.
I mean, yeah, but he was he wasn't that old. He was what,
28?
Yeah.
That's Nick Claxton's 23.
I mean, yeah, but
would you trade Clint Capella for Jabari Smith? Would be a better comp.
Well, Clint Capella is injured all the time. I don't know. That's I don't know. I think that's kind of a different thing. And he's way more reliant on athleticism. Brook Lopez was always a low post killer.
He was, but also I think it's pretty crazy how many players in the history of the NBA have ever changed themselves. How many offensive first post players have turned themselves into defensive player of the year candidates in their 30s?
That's true.
That never happens.
Because he was an okay rebounder, but he was not a good defender, and then he turned himself.
He didn't even really shoot threes until he got to the Lakers. So
I still think it's a bad move. But anyway,
I think it's a fine move. Considering where the Nets were, I really don't think it matters. Also, if Brook Lopez only had 1 year left on his deal, if he wanted to leave, then at least you got something for him. Okay, so let's run through. All right, so we talked about the Lakers for a little bit. We talked about the Knicks. We have to talk about the Blazers because the Blazers, this offseason is probably the most damning for them than any other team because the Lakers stunk. They were not good. They were in the middle of a rebuild. The Knicks had been meh. I know they probably, in fairness to the Knicks, they probably could have gotten one or two more good years with Carmelo and Porzingis and kind of really righted the ship if they did nail this offseason and it didn't fucking completely sink it. But no one really thought of them as on the come up. They were on the latter end of whatever they were building, except for the Porzingis move, obviously kind of saved that a little bit. But this was squarely in the middle of CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard's prime. And they signed Alan Crabb, they matched the Nets because what Sean Marks did this offseason was he just went out and he threw offer sheets at all these restricted free agents because he knew that teams were going to have to either overpay to keep them or they were going to end up getting guys. And yeah, maybe it was a slight overpay, but like Jeremy Lin and Alan, these were guys that they valued with the Nets. And Alan Crabb signs a 4-year, $75 million deal. He ends up getting traded a year later to the Nets. He doesn't even finish.
But for nothing, which was
for Andrew Nicholson, who also signed like a 4-year, $28 million contract.
I was going to say, I wait, didn't Nicholson get kind of a bag that offseason?
Yep.
Dude, I loved him, whatever year that was he was coming out of the draft.
2012.
I think he got drafted by the Magic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
With like
Draymond just brought this up on a podcast recently, and he said he's like, I don't even look at Andrew Nicholson and say that guy looks like a basketball player. He was like talking about how pissed he was when Andrew Nicholson got drafted before him.
I forgot that was Draymond's draft. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Draymond should have gotten drafted higher. I remember that draft, and like Draymond should have been like a end of the teens guy, and because they hadn't figured out the inefficiency of like old guys.
Like, he was 22.
And that was the thing that draft. But man, God, I wish Draymond. I wish you had been drafted higher. We could have one of the most annoying chapters in.
We wouldn't be sitting here talking about Kevin Durant ruining the league.
Yeah, we could have gotten out ahead of the birth of one of the most annoying fan bases in the NBA. Remember, Warriors fans used to be endearing. I swear, I was friends with a Warriors fan before, like pre-Steph, like was telling me about like Monte Ellis.
What Sam is trying to say here is he hates the rail ball rock guys.
That's right. I hate those guys. Joey and Sean, I will never go on their show except ever. I did except 5 days ago.
Which, if you didn't listen to that, it's one of the funniest podcasts we've ever done. So go listen to the Rainbow Rock last episode with us.
They were killing me.
They were very funny.
Taste trade. Joey chopped up 2 different low and fucking Windhorst ad reads from like 2015 that were. I don't think I've ever. I really had to dig deep to that. Like
Sam was covering his face the entire time,
laughing. I was crying laughing.
Yeah, it was very, very funny. Multiple people have told me how funny that was. Yeah. But okay, so not only did they have the Alan Crabb thing during this offseason, the Blazers, we already talked about Evan Turner, which honestly, for its money, just on its face, it's got to be Mozgov or Evan Turner as the worst contract for this offseason because. At least with Joakim Noah and Nicholas Batum and these guys that got crazy bags, you could be, or even like Solomon Hill was like 23 at the time. Like you could talk yourself into some of these deals. Evan Turner had one good NBA season in his entire career. Timothy Mozgov was like barely even good. He was older at the time. Evan Turner, I think, was 27, 28 at the time. Of this, like it wasn't like you had some untapped potential with Evan Turner signing this 4-year, $70 million contract that everyone knew was dog shit from the jump. He also was like a point guard, like he needed the ball, and you had Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum as your two core pieces. You just extended CJ McCollum this offseason, and look, I don't know if the Blazers were ever going to be good enough to make the finals or anything with CJ and Dame. But signing those 2 guys, Alan Crabb and Evan Turner, and also signing Myers Leonard to a 4-year, $41 million contract during this offseason, like they also signed Festus Ezeli to a 2-year, $15 million deal. Like they basically ruined whatever chances they had this offseason of contending by just throwing away a ton of money at these guys that were like not even rotation players for them, except for Myers Leonard, who played like a kind of important role on that Western Conference Finals team. Like they were, this is what really ruined any window that they would have had with Damian Lillard.
Yeah. I mean, cause like, I think people forget, like at this time, like LaMarcus Aldridge had like just left, I think the offseason before.
Year before 2015.
Yeah. To go to
they
the
lost
Spurs.
Nicholas Batum.
Yeah, Batum had left, and they had Wes Matthews had gone to the Mavericks, I believe.
Yep.
I think that was this offseason, right? Or was it the
Nope.
year before? It was the year
I think
before.
it was the year before, yeah.
So they were like retooling on the fly. Like they like had something in McCollum that they weren't really expecting, because he was like a number 10 pick, number 9.
He was the 10 pick, and he didn't really play in his rookie year.
Yeah, and he was like, coming out of like the Patriot League, I believe.
Yeah,
Lehigh. And so like, they weren't really sure what they were like doing, but they saw that they had like good young guys. Like Damian Lillard was like a clear up and coming guy. And it was just kind of that thing where it's like, you have cap space, you have a young guy on a contract that's about to get expensive. You start having urgency to like fill that with stuff. And I think that's kind of the perfect storm that like Portland found that in. Was that?
Yeah, I was just going to say they just filled it with diarrhea.
Yeah.
A literal shitstorm.
Yeah. I feel kind of bad because they just got kind of owned. Like, I wonder if they would have made calls this bad if this weren't the cap season year that they had.
Sure.
Like, they just got fucked here a little bit, I think, like by the timing.
Yeah,
they also did a bad job, but like
they did do a bad job, but like everyone did a bad job. Like it's kind of hard to get mad at teams when everyone was just like so drunk on the slop this offseason. With the cap spike, like that just like changed how everyone kind of viewed all of the money, you got to spend it. Like you got to spend it. Like that's kind of how everyone viewed it. And like the agents had the teams in hell. Because it's like, okay, you don't want to pay my guy? This team has a ton of cap space too. Everyone has cap space. This is what happens when there's just leverage everywhere. And you can just spend and give as much years as possible just to get a guy so you can say, hey, look, we're trying, Dame. We're trying, CJ. Like, we're going out here getting guys. And I actually, a funny thing I noticed while I was reading through this, two things, actually. The first was, I found the Woj tweet when they signed Festus Ezeli, the Blazers. By the way, Festus Ezeli had barely played in the NBA to this point. Like he was injured a ton with the Warriors. He never really played after this because of his injuries. And this spawned one of the greatest videos of all time. Do you remember the So Far Away? I think it's a Nickelback song.
Yeah.
Or no, Stain. It's a Stain song. Festus Ezeli, the 8-bit, like, looks like it was recorded on a Game Boy Advance SP. Video of Festus Ezeli. And it's I
forgot about Festus. That was this offseason too.
Yes. It was. He left the Warriors.
Oh, and it was Portland.
Yep.
It was Portland. No.
And he was like, thank you, Warriors fans. And it was like, and it was just like the grainiest footage you've ever seen, dude.
That was awesome, man. God, fuck. Salute to Festus for getting the bag before his body quit on him, though. That was,
Oh, and also people were so high on Festus Ezeli during this that the contracts were so bad. Keep in mind, this is after all these bad contracts are signed and everyone's brain is just completely broken, that when Festus Ezeli signed for 2 years, $15 million with the Blazers, I found the Woj tweet and it was a Celtics fan saying, man, I would have liked to have him at that price. I would have paired him with Horford. What the fuck?
Yeah, what it was $15 million a year or something like that?
No, it was 2 for 15, but only the first year was guaranteed. But like
that's honestly not that bad of a contract, to be honest. It's just the fact that he like never played an NBA game again is what makes
that was really tough. A lot of these guys did get injured. Like Chandler Parsons was a good player. He just got hurt all the time. Joakim Noah, obviously, like you could see some of these deals and understand the reasoning behind them at the time. But in retrospect, it just seems so insane to kind of like see how much money they were getting, except for the few that we all knew were dog shit from the jump. And those were Evan Turner and Timothy Mozgov and a few others. But the Blazers signed 2 of the worst contracts in this offseason in Allen Crabbe and Evan Turner. They later, at a certain point, acquired 2 other really bad deals that were signed in Hassan Whiteside that they got 3 years later and Kent Bazemore. So they got 4 of the worst contracts all ended up on the Blazers at a certain point after. Like Neil Olshey was cooking with. So I think at one point, I know for a fact Evan Turner was traded for Kent Bazemore. They were both signed.
That's right. I forgot
they
about
were traded
that.
for each other.
Yes.
Which, oh my God, dude! Like so many bad. And I'm gonna pull up something right now. It's a CJ McCollum tweet that is. By the way, you're going to question how CJ McCollum became the president of the NBA Players Union after this?
Yeah.
It's Chandler Parsons tweeting at the Blazers, good luck in the lottery this year. And CJ McCollum saying, we hit the lottery, not signing you.
I mean, so it's one of those things where it's like correct, but also not correct.
But
like,
also, you signed even worse. Like, at least with Chandler Parsons, you could say like, oh, like he's a good shooter and he can like create a and like, yeah, he got overpaid.
Orgy room if you sign Chandler allegedly. If you signed Chandler Parsons, so that's the orgy room had to get moved to Memphis, which is not a place that is very conducive to orgies. I would love to give. Like, I would love to give fucking Vernon truth serum and ask him about the orgy room. And let me tell you,
I don't even know what you're talking about.
They have so many pillows in there. There was like a rumor that like he had that like he like loved orgies. I know.
Oh, let's go, King.
I was gonna say allegedly.
Now I'm gonna watch a show.
Yeah. But
FanDuel show.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That Chandler Parsons contract was really fucking bad, man.
Like, it was bad. Yeah. And keep in mind,
like, at least Evan Turner played. Like, at least he was a body who played out there, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of. All right. Hold on. I'm pulling up Chandler Parsons. We're going real sicko mode right now. How many games did Chandler Parsons play the year before he signed that contract? He had played a lot of games up until that point, though. He had played so he played 61 the year before, 66, 74, 76, 63. So like he only missed 15 to 20 games a year. And then after that, he played 34, 36, 25, 5. So like, also like the year before Chandler Parsons signed that contract, dude, he averaged 14 points a game on 49, 41, 68. He didn't shoot well for the free throw line splits. Like he was like a solid starter at that point. He was better than Evan Turner.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. He was good, but like he also was like so injured. Speaking of guys who like had injury issues,
but he wasn't injured up until that point. He only missed 15 to 20 games a year.
Really, with Dallas, I remember him like not being.
Played 61 games the year before that, and his first year he played 66.
I was too boomer coded that year. Like, I was like, that is inexcusable. Missing a quarter of the season.
Yes, yeah, it's different now. It's very different now.
Well, now I'm like mad at Jason Tatum for playing 80 games. Fucking rest.
Do you see what Jimmy Butler's doing?
Yes. Oh my God. Just rest and just be good in the playoffs. I don't care. I don't care about winning 60 games. We can be a 7 seed. It's fine.
All right, here's some. We're in peak name some guys territory. John Lure signed a 4-year, $42 million contract. Do you remember him?
I do. I
don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right.
No, you're right. John Lure. That was his name. Like that.
I don't remember him at all.
That one was like a lower one, but that was like weird because like he played for the Bucks before this.
Yes.
Correct. And like. I never remember him being good for the Bucks, like at all. And I was
he wasn't good.
Yeah, and I was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. And he signed with the Pistons, who also gave Andre Drummond a 5-year, $130 million max contract that offseason. And then they ended up dumping him to the Cleveland Cavaliers 3 years later in a trade. And by the end of that contract, he was bought out by the Cavs, signed with the Lakers, and now has since, become one of the better backups in the NBA. But like, got a 5-year, $130 million contract. I believe he had made 2 All-Star teams or 1 All-Star team at that point with the Pistons. They also had already given Greg Monroe a ton of money. Yeah. So once again, a common theme that you'll find on this podcast is that the Pistons have had no idea what the fuck they're doing for 15 years, it feels like. And the other thing that I learned about Andre Drummond this week, did you know that we are currently in the crossover months where Duncan Robinson and Andre Drummond are the same age?
I saw that.
Both 29 years old right now.
And Drummond has been in the league 11 years.
Well, yeah, when he signed this 5-year, $130 million contract, he was 22 years old.
That's crazy. He was 17?
No, hold on.
That can't be true.
Okay, so he was 22, but he was about to turn 23.
Okay.
Because this was 7 years ago, right?
I remember he was young. He was really young for that UConn team. I remember that.
He was 19 by the end of his rookie year.
This is just bumming me out for Pistons fans so bad because I remember the Josh Smith, Greg Monroe, Drummond front court, and they beat all of the. Oh fuck!
He had made one All-Star team at 22 years old, and then he signed this contract this offseason. He made one more All-Star team.
Pistons fans, what the Pistons have done to their fans is so much worse. Like, there's nothing else that's like close. And were you listening?
Hold on. There is something that is close. Do you remember when the CIA tested out LSD?
Yeah. It really does feel like an MK Ultra experiment, like on like Pistons fans. Like,
we did Hamilton Morris's dad to make a documentary about this.
Yeah, So did you hear, this was the other really fascinating part what the Bill was like talking about with House, where they were talking about like this was 7 years ago. They're talking about which fan bases had it worse.
Sure.
And some of the fan bases they brought up were the Kings, who, did have it really bad until last year. The Suns, which I thought was very funny. They said the Bucks, also very funny. Bill also gave them
the Bucks?
He said the Bucks. And
Giannis had popped off by this point, right?
I don't think so.
I think his breakout year was 2015, 2016. He was like,
he
won most improved player at 21 years old. He averaged 17. He made the All-Star team the next year.
I think they were still doing stuff like trading for Brandon.
They made bad moves.
Alice.
I mean, we talked about Matthew Dellavedova and John Lure. John Lure left for the Pistons.
Left the team, yeah.
But they signed a guy I had never even heard of.
Bill said that like if the Bucks moved to the team, that like the fans wouldn't be that sad, which was like one of the unnecessary pot shot at Milwaukee, and he was listing what they would have. Like, they'd still have the Packers, they still have the Brewers, they'd still have Marquette, they'd still have Wisconsin.
Marquette.
Yeah, it was so funny to list like Marquette and Wisconsin as like things they would still have.
Did he say University of Wisconsin? You just said Marquette.
No, University of Wisconsin. He said them both, but like it's still just like very funny.
That is funny. Yeah, because he was comparing it to another team moving, and I think it was Seattle, right? Or it was one of those teams. Oh no, Sacramento. He was saying Sacramento because Sacramento has nothing else, was his point. And I mean, he's not wrong. Sacramento really does have nothing else, but it is funny in retrospect. I mean, you should have felt good about the Bucks at that point. Yeah, Giannis had just won most improved player, and he was about to make the All-Star team. So, but all right. So, Harrison Barnes signs a 4-year, $94 million contract. Do you remember when everyone like shit on Harrison Barnes for like 4 straight years because he signed this massive deal and he never lived up to expectations with the Mavericks, but like he was just clearly overextended and like not an on-ball guy. And he's another guy that's just made like a ton of fucking money in his career. Like he's one of those guys that's in this mix. But let's talk a little. There are 2 teams that I want to talk about here before we get into a few other things. But it's the Heat and the Bulls, because this offseason, first off, the Heat.
This is the funniest. This is the one that I wanted to get to because this is the funniest one.
Well, the Heat don't get enough shit for how bad this offseason was because just like the Lakers, they have. I always talk about teams having margin for error. Like the Blazers have 0 margin for error. The Blazers had to nail this offseason or they're cooked. Like you can't sign a bunch of bad contracts and then just be totally fine if you're a market like Portland, unless you're also like drafting amazingly at the same time. Your margin for error is just so thin. Miami and Los Angeles, they get out of contracts like it's fucking nothing. And they also have the ability to just bring in free agents to make up, like LeBron James and Jimmy Butler, to make up for the fact that they are dealing like shit with these teams that they're building. Mm-hmm. So the Heat were in on, I don't know if you remember this, but the Heat, Zach talked about this a lot, and the Heat's pitch to Kevin Durant was basically, all right, in OKC, you're like the second banana to Russell Westbrook, right? Like everything kind of revolves around like Russ, and like you're the guy who just gets buckets and whatever. We're going to change everything, and you're going to be the center of everything. Everything's going to revolve around you, and you're going to be the main hub. And Spo and Riley are giving him this pitch. And he's like, I really like that idea. That's a great idea. I'm going to go sign with the Warriors, where it's going to be the much better version of essentially that. So they miss out on KD. Also, Dwayne Wade was a big point of contention for this offseason as well.
Yes. Yep.
Because everyone thought Wade was going to be with the Heat for the rest of his career. And they were negotiating over dollars and cents. And Wade didn't want to take another pay cut, and Riley wasn't going to give him the bag. So basically what happened was they lose. Wade walks to the Bulls. He signs this 2-year, $48 million contract with a player option of the second year, which actually turned out very bad for the Bulls. But Hassan Whiteside signed a 4-year, $98 million, which was more than 20% of the cap.
And what I want to say this because someone generally considered like a pretty good deal. I would say, like,
yeah, no, people didn't shit on this.
No, nobody really shit on this. I didn't really either, and I kind of hated the Heat. I was like, fuck, they got their guy back. But then they just fucked up the Dwayne Wade thing so bad. Like, I mean, fucked it up. I mean, Dwayne Wade was cooked. Like this was bared out. Like he was. Went to the Bulls was shitty, went to the Cavs was shittier, and then
went back to the Heat.
His Kobe, fucking reunion tour where you like ruin your team your team is so bad that you just like let a guy like you give your franchise star basically a Make-A-Wish season.
I was gonna say actually Wade kind of, if I remember correctly, Wade was better his last year and a half with the than he was like the previous few seasons. He was like fully cooked.
No, he was actually a lot better. He had like some game winners.
Yeah, against the Warriors famously in that season. Yeah.
Like he was a lot better that year. But I think I think what's just crazy is that you push your guy out ignominiously, which like sure, but then what they spent the money on instead outside of the Hassan Whiteside was like.
Oh yeah, no, hold on. Okay. You're gonna see. I'm pulling it up on the screen right now.
All right.
We got some Heat propaganda that I was sent to by Fox himself in the YKB Discord.
Okay.
This is the article that was published. You have to look at the screen, Sam.
Yep.
This is the article that was published after Tyler Johnson, Mad Money. When Tyler Johnson signed a $50 million deal, the world lost its mind. Here's the crazy thing. He might be worth it.
That's so true. Pablo Torre. I knew it was Pablo. I said what Pablo Torre. It was either going to be Pablo Torre or Israel Gutierrez. And I'm so glad it was Pablo Torre though. Perfect. Mwah.
So they signed Tyler Johnson to a 4-year $50 million deal that they had to dump to the Phoenix Suns later. He was eventually bought out of that contract and ended up on the Nets and Sixers, has not really had an NBA career since. But this was when the Heat were really high on their own supply before they started like nailing the undrafted guy thing. And also, because if I remember correctly, Tyler Johnson and Hassan Whiteside were both undrafted. And they also were not nailing their high picks. They had the only high pick they had in the pipeline at that time was Justice Winslow, who obviously did not pan out for them. That was partially due to injuries, but that was once again, the Heat being very high on their own supply. Another low key thing that isn't talked about because he didn't sign a crazy offseason contract this offseason was Dion Waiters signed a 2-year prove it deal with the Heat. He signed a 2-year, $6 million deal. The second year option was declined, and then he's extended for 4 years and $52 million the year after. They also signed James Johnson the following offseason. The Heat had probably 4 of the worst contracts in the NBA on their books at that time, and they got all of them scot-free. Like, it was fucking nothing. Like, I don't even think they might have given up 1 first-round pick in all of these trades to get off of it. And they ended up with Jimmy Butler a few years after this for basically Josh Richardson and Hassan Whiteside. So there's that. Awesome.
I will say, was this might have been the year they signed, I think they might have signed Kelly Olynyk with this money too? Or was that the next year?
That was the next year.
Okay. All right.
Because Kelly Olynyk had the game, didn't he have a game winner or something for the Celtics in the 2016-2017 playoffs?
Oh yeah, no, because the Wizards, the game 7, the famous game 7 is this coming season. So yeah, it's the next year.
Yeah. So they overpaid Kelly Olynyk the following season. See, they basically just had a horrible contract on their whole team.
Well, I will admit, I think Kelly Olynyk was a better contract than some of these other ones. Like, they had James Johnson. I think they signed him to like 13 to 14 million. Like, they extended Justice Winslow on a bad contract.
Yep.
Which hurt my feelings because I really believed in Justice Winslow. Like, that was my guy coming out of that draft. I was so pissed when we didn't get him. Could have traded both the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown picks for that.
Would have been worth it, dude, to get Winslow.
God, that is like one of the biggest sliding. That might be bigger than Durant. Like, to be honest, like, can you imagine if
why did it happen?
I know. Can you imagine if the Hornets just had Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown?
I mean, they wouldn't have, let's be honest, they wouldn't have drafted Jason Tatum or Jaylen.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
They would have just taken the wrong
Chris
player.
Dunn. They would taken Chris Dunn and
they would have taken Fultz.
Yeah,
and he would have been a bust for them.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, fair enough. But I think one of the ultimate examples of getting away with it. They also traded 2 firsts for Goran Dragic, which I think had happened before this.
Yes,
just really far out, and just like this is like one of the ultimate. They should have been ruined for 10 years, but Jimmy Butler and Spo.
Well, I want to talk about Jimmy Butler because Wade goes to the Bulls and he sucks and it's, whatever, like gets paid like crazy.
Time he was like wiring money to Jimmy.
Planting seeds.
Yeah, there was like
in Jimmy's brain. You need to be treated like a star. You're a star. Why don't they treat you like a star here?
What is going on here? Nobody, you're a winner, Jimmy. Nobody is, you know what? You're like the spotlight should always be on you, and people should interview you. You should tell people more about your morning routines. I've got a guy I want you to meet. This guy could have stopped 9/11. His name is Mark Wahlberg. And I want you to learn his mindset and it is funny because Jimmy Butler getting traded to the Heat stopped their 9/11. Which he learned from Mark Wahlberg. So,
wow. This was the genesis of so many 9/11 related things. It's just amazing.
God, the 3 alphas. God.
All right, so let's talk about the 3 alphas because that's what happened this offseason. The Bulls sign Dwayne Wade, homecoming back to Chicago. 2 years, $48 million with the player option on the second year. Rondo signs for 2 years, $28 million. And at this point, even Bill, who was like, look, I'll defend Rondo to the death because he was my guy on the Celtics and I loved him. But like, there's a few examples now. He kind of wore out his welcome on the Mavs. He wore out his welcome on the Kings. There's kind of some examples that Rajon Rondo might not be the best guy that you want to kind of bring into your locker room at this point. But they said from the jump, this was going to be a disaster. They were like, the 3 alpha thing, they called that exactly, which was 3 guys in Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, and Rajon Rondo who all want to be the guy. They also called out the fact that Rondo and Wade at that point in their career didn't want to play defense. And they also called out the fact that you're building your team around 3 guys who aren't shooters in 2016 when we're coming into the 3-point spacing shooting era. And if you look at that roster, it's hilarious that they thought that team was really going to work. Mostly because of the fact that they didn't have like modern spacing. Like I think they said Mirotic was like their best floor spacer on the whole team. And like, he was like fine. Like there was no one that was really like a high volume, good shooter. So obviously they had just traded Derrick Rose, who, didn't work out in Chicago after winning MVP years prior. Yeah. And they called from the jump, like this was going to be a disaster. They ended up being the 8th seed. They lose in the first round. They trade Jimmy a year later. Wade, did they buy out Wade? I think they just bought him out and he went to the Cavs the next year. Rondo was gone a year later. Everything just went to complete shit in 1 year, basically, for the Bulls. And this turned out to be kind of the turning point for them and the savior point for the Heat, because a few years later, Jimmy goes there and turns around their franchise.
Yeah. I mean, well, they did win 2 home games against the 1 seed. This was the Heat that this was
Heat Celtics, right?
Heat. Yeah, this is the difference between Bulls Celtics. This is the difference between Eric Spoelstra and Fred Hoiberg right here. Jimmy could have been doing this 7 years early, if Fred Hoiberg hadn't gotten in his way. So
God, Thibs was already gone at that point. It's Fred Hoiberg.
It was fucking Christ. Fred Hoiberg, man.
Oh my God.
Rough.
Bulls coaching choices, not great.
Well, it's because Tibbs had run Luol Deng into the ground.
Sure.
And Noah too. Like he had played those guys like 8 billion minutes. Like,
yeah. And their bodies were just broken.
Yeah, their careers like fell apart immediately after that.
Yep.
They did get bags though, so who's to say if Tom Thibodeau is
battered?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He was a genius. He knew that he would get them bags. He's a labor hero, yeah. Tom Thibodeau.
Drunk driving's bad, but it also gets you to work on time. So who's to say if it's bad or not?
Well, let's think about it. Let's think about it like this.
Yeah.
Tibbs leaves, goes to the Wolves. Those guys, Noah and Rose, get bags, end up on the Knicks, ruin the Knicks, and then years later, who did the Knicks hire as their head coach?
Tom Thibodeau. Yeah.
Stay woke.
Stay woke. Think about it. Think it out.
All of this is just due to Tom Thibodeau. That's what I'm trying to say. He controls everything.
Kaiser Soze
of everything.
Instead of the walk, it's the voice. He's walking out of there, and then it just morphs into like an evil laugh. Like that's that's how he's tricking.
I am surprised reading through all of this that the Wolves didn't do any stupid shit during this offseason.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like the one team that I would expect, like, oh, the Wolves made it insanely dumb. No, the Wolves were pretty scot-free. They didn't really do anything this offseason.
I mean, the other thing, though, is they don't really have it's not really a lot of options. It's kind of hard to like.
You could have overpaid. I mean, look at all these guys going to teams like the Hornets and the Magic and the Blazers that never get free agents.
That's true. That's true.
I wonder how much cap space did they have? I'm looking this up now.
Yeah, I would guess they probably have like the non-taxpayer mid-level.
No, they had to have because everyone had cap space because of the salary cap.
This season. I thought you were talking about this most recent.
No. I'm talking about 2016.
Jeez, I'm not even sure what their team looked like. Wiggins was there.
Ricky Rubio.
Yeah.
Nikola Pekovic.
Yeah. I remember. I kind of liked Pekovic. He was like another he was Valanciunas before Valanciunas, but worse. Where just like a foul. He was like a foul machine. Like he couldn't stay on the floor, no defense, but was like a low post god. Kevin Love.
No, Kevin Love was gone.
Kevin Love was gone.
They had Zach LaVine still. Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Nemanja Bjelica.
Have they drafted Jared Culver yet, or was that next year? That was
3 years later. Yeah. No, they had Tyus Jones,
Chris Dunn.
Chris Dunn was still on the team. Yes.
Yep.
Chris Dunn they had just drafted 2016. Yeah.
Well, they drafted him. I think he was technically traded draft night for Jimmy Butler. I think, right?
Yes, with the pick that was Lauri Markkanen and Zach LaVine. So actually, Bill had a package. I forgot to bring this up. Bill's trade package for the Timberwolves for Russell Westbrook was Andrew Wiggins, Chris Dunn, and Zach LaVine. And he said, actually, I think that's too much. And they were all very high on Wiggins as the centerpiece of all of that. So very funny in retrospect. Yeah. But all right, last few things here. I have a list of the only big contracts that I could find that I felt like aged well, where a player actually changed teams. And that was Al Horford, 4 years, $113 million, and Eric Gordon signed with the Rockets, 4 years, $52 million. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Every other deal was like complete fucking dog shit, dude. Like,
yeah.
The only other one that was like, there were a few that like guys went back, like major extensions that were fine for young guys. One deal that turned out fine for the Lakers was Jordan Clarkson for 4 years, $52 million, that everyone thought was an insane overpay at the time.
Yeah.
But they ended up just dumping him a few years later, and like he's turned out to be a fine player. He wasn't great on that contract, but still.
Yeah.
And then I just want to talk, this was the last thing I want to talk about here during this offseason was what the Sixers did. Which was you might not know this, but the Sixers tried to max Manu for one season. He was 38 years old, and they offered him the full max because they had a ton of cap space too. 2016, Hinkie's gone. Brian Colangelo's running the team now, and they had. I'm honestly shocked that Colangelo didn't fuck this up more. I'm shocked. I'm shocked because we talk about like all these like fail son GMs, and he's like the definition. His dad was Jerry Colangelo, even though he built some pretty good teams. Like he built the Raptors that ended up being pretty good. Like he traded for Kyle Lowry. He drafted DeMar DeRozan. He had some pretty good teams with the Suns. I mean, he built that team in the mid 2010s that was really good, if I remember correctly. I'm not 2010, 2000s. And he tried to max Manu for a year, but he chose to go back to the Spurs for $14 million to play his final 2 seasons with the Spurs. He also gave Sergio Rodriguez a 1-year, $8 million contract. And he gave Gerald Henderson a 2-year, $19 million contract, but only the first year was guaranteed. And he gave Jared Bayless a 3-year, $27 million that they talked about on the podcast because it broke during the Bill and House podcast.
Very, very funny. Very funny to Jared Bayless. Talk about like a just no impact NBA player. That's just like a smooth brain. Like had a cup of coffee with the Celtics. Like that is a guy.
Yeah. We knew immediately it was a bad signing, but in retrospect, it was like, okay, he sucked for 2 years for the team, and then they traded him in the Jimmy Butler trade to the Timberwolves.
Yeah, he bounced around. Like I think of him as like the Marcus Thornton type. That was
sure.
I remember him playing for the Grizzlies. I can't remember if that was before, because I think this was him coming off of the Celtics, who had like gotten him for the Grizzlies. I think in the Jeff Green trade, I want to say.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So that was
he had played for the Bucks the year before.
Okay. All right. Never mind.
Yeah. But you guys had him 2 years before that. And just once again, he was pretty bad. He only played 3 games for the Sixers. He got injured pretty much immediately. He only played 3 games in 2016. And then in 2017, he famously started over Markelle Fultz, and everyone was like, this is bad. Why is this happening? He only ended up playing 42 games for the Sixers in 2 seasons, and then they traded him away for Jimmy Butler in the last year of his contract. Sergio Rodriguez, just another completely nothing player. But like I said, like he tried to give Harrison Barnes a 4-year max, but luckily Harrison Barnes didn't want to come here because the Sixers were seen as a joke at the time. But other than that, like pretty much got away from this offseason scot-free. Gave away short-term deals. Like I said, like the smart front offices were either giving guys value like Ainge, and Morey had the Ryan Anderson deal is a fuck up. Like that was a bad contract to give out, but the Eric Gordon deal was a really good deal.
Yeah.
And the teams like OKC and the teams like Toronto didn't overpay for a ton of guys. Like I said, the Sixers ended up walking away. Even the Colangelo Sixers only gave these short-term deals. The teams that really fucked themselves this offseason were the Blazers.
Yep.
And the Blazers are the real big loss. The Knicks, sure, but the Knicks were also just like whatever. But the Knicks definitely fucked up after drafting Porzingis and kind of being like on top of the world because of that. They fucked up. The Lakers fucked up, and the Heat fucked up. But the Lakers and the Heat have these crazy buffers that doesn't matter. Well,
it was all the big market teams and then Portland.
Yeah.
like just because like that's how it like happened to like go for them. Which that's a bummer. That's a bummer for them.
Yep.
Also, the
Chicago too, but yeah.
Also, the kind of the beginning of the end for the Hawks to try and galaxy brain their way into swapping Horford for
Dwight Howard,
who stunk.
So Dwight signed a 4-year, $70 million contract, which honestly everyone was like, "That's totally fine for," or it was $490 maybe. Hold on, let me look it up.
It was just they just didn't appreciate Al Horford. Like they just didn't have a good handle that Al Horford was like kind of what was driving that like. He was probably the most important player on that 60 win.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Certainly. In retrospect, it's and like I think Bill was arguing Millsap was the best player on that team on his podcast. He signed a 3-year, $70 million contract, Dwight Howard, which was basically the max, $23 million a year with the Hawks, and then bounced around from team to team after that, played for the Wizards for a little bit, and then got hurt and It was not a good deal. It ended up being that was the end of Dwight Howard being seen as like a really good NBA player.
Our long national Dwightmare was finally over.
Bill, remember he was connected to the Celtics that offseason too, and he's like, Bill was like, no, we're not signing Dwight. Like he did not.
People were like talking themselves. Like if we weren't gonna get Al Horford, I was like kind of talking myself into like because you've got to remember the Celtics were not like. Considered like the Celtics were still like kind of shitty like right now. They were like the Celtics were viewed right now kind of the way that we would view like the Nets or the like right now
the current iteration of the Nets,
current iteration of the Nets, like where it's like they could do some things but they're probably not very good. Like
they had won. But they won 48 games the year before?
They had won 48 games the year before, but like very close. The boss man, once they got Jay Crowder,
Will's going to destroy you for this. Sam, they were shitty. They won 48 games the year before.
Hold on. How many wins did the Nets win last year? There was something.
Yeah, but they traded Kevin Durant and Kyrie, and part of the reason they were the 1 seed.
Still won 48 games. Will can't yell at me.
They won 48 exactly.
Celtics won exactly this. It's exactly as hard to be a Celtics fan as it is to be a Nets fan. I want to be very clear about that.
I was going to say because. As he has pointed out before,
45 and 37. So
and they were still worse. And they had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the first half of the season. Yeah. I just want to point out that Jaden Springer, who is now entering his 3rd year in the NBA, he's barely ever played, has been a part of as many 50-win teams as the Brooklyn Nets since they have joined the NBA. Or he might even have more. I think the Nets only have 1 50-win season since they've joined the NBA. I need to look this up. I need to confirm this right now.
Wow.
Hold on. Number of 50. All right. NBA teams with the most 50. No, I don't want that. I need to see how many they have. I think it's 1. And I don't think that the Wizards have won since 50 games since the 70s.
That's tough.
So, like, I bitch about the Sixers all the time and losing in the second round. I think they've won. They would have either won 50 games or been on pace to win 50 games every single year of Joel Embiid when he actually plays. So since 2017, 2018. And some of these teams, the Wizards haven't done it since the 70s. The Nets have done it 1 time.
Yeah, the Wizards... the Wizards are probably next. It's like Wizards, Hornets, Detroit are like my triangle of pain right now. Like for like teams, all those teams are in rough shape right now. Like
Wizards, Hornets, Detroit, and I completely missed out on one of the worst deals that the last contract. Speaking of, because I was going to say, all 3 of those teams did really shitty this offseason. Ian Mahimni was his name?
Ian Mahimni. John Mahimni. Yes. Champion, NBA champion with the Dallas Mavericks.
Yes.
Yes. With the Pacers, right? Or no?
He signed.
The Wizards signed him, right?
So yes, the Wizards at the time, who had Bradley Beal, they actually had a pretty good young team. They had Bradley Beal, they had John Wall, they had Kelly Oubre, they had like a Otto Porter.
Yep.
Yeah, and they almost signed. They had a meeting with Al Horford, and when they missed out on him, they signed Jan. How do you pronounce it? Jan Mahim.
Jan Mahimny, yeah.
Jan Mahimny. They signed Jan Mahimny to a 4-year, $64 million contract, and he has not played in the NBA since that contract.
Yeah, that was like brutal. I remember that because I think he won. I think he was the backup. Let me double check this because I'm pretty sure he was like the backup big behind Tyson Chandler for that.
He was. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, yeah. And then he played for the Pacers, I think, for a few years. Is that correct?
No, he signed with the Mavericks. Maybe he got traded to the Pacers.
Maybe he got traded to the Pacers after that. He definitely played for the Pacers. I'm almost positive for like a little bit, and then ended up with the Wizards and was like,
yeah, you're right.
Horrible. Yeah,
he got traded to the Pacers a year into his next contract, and he might have even been signed and traded to the Pacers. Yeah. And he was just like a backup big, and then he barely played for the Wizards and made $64 million.
So bad, man. And they had like Marcin Gortat, or like maybe they got him that next season, but like, I think they had him at this point. Who was good? Who was like a really good starting center? Like he was. But this is gonna sound insane, but Marcin Gortat was like a legit like top 10 NBA set, like maybe even like top 5. That's gonna sound crazy, but like he was really good, like in like the late 2010s. Like
I was going to say, he had a few good seasons, and then at the end of his career, he got traded for Austin Rivers, who actually got a bag from his dad.
Yeah.
Austin Doc was the president of basketball operations for the Clippers at the time, and he gave Austin a 3-year, $36 million contract.
Yeah.
That offseason, 2016. And the Clippers basically just ran it back, and then that was kind of the end of the Clippers.
Right.
2016, 2017, was that the last year? Or no, they had 2 more years. And then no, it was the last year because Chris Paul got traded the offseason after this. So we'll talk about that at another time. But man, 2 years reminiscing in the middle of July on the
this has been one of the ultimate remember some guys things.
Yes.
I will not be here later in the week. So
I'm replacing Sam, by the way.
I've been fired from the podcast for the sponsors have said it's too many 9/11 jokes. This is not what a basketball show is supposed to be. I'll be back after I go on a Lance Thomas fueled bender though. So much more fun. I'll be like Mulaney, like when he like went on like SNL and everyone was like, like
we're worried about you.
Oh, we're worried about you, man. Like, so thanks, Lance Thomas, for what you've done to me.
Sam is feeling the high of Cillian Murphy crushing it in Oppenheimer by comparing himself to John Mulaney, who got Olivia Munn pregnant.
I'm exactly like those two guys. I'm exactly like those two guys.
Our Irish brethren.
Yeah, I have people have said, because I'm Irish, I look and I also have a horse face. I look exactly like Cillian Murphy. I'm exactly as hot as him, and I'm exactly as funny and interesting as John Mulaney.
Exactly. I was going to say DM Sam, but if there are any women that listen to the podcast, they're definitely not still listening 2 hours.
only the real sickos, the real heads who are still listening to this. What's up?
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. I'll be back later in the week. Sam's going to enjoy his vacation.
Yeah.
Peace.